Durango City Council meeting, and thank you for those of you joining us live on DIGA. We're happy to have you here. Ms. Phillips, may we have a roll call, please?
Certainly. Councillor Baxter. Present. Councillor Patine.
Here.
Councillor Noseworthy.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Brookie.
Here.
And Mayor Youssef.
Here. City Council, do we have any actual or perceived conflicts of interest this evening? Seeing none, I will move into public participation, but I'm seeing that we do not have a sign-up sheet tonight. So I will just look out and see if there's anyone that would like to do public participation tonight. No public participation. That is a first in a very long time. Then we will move on to item number 5, 2 presentations, starting with Ms. Sarah Dodson for transportation.
All right. Hello, Mayor Youssef and councilors. Thank you for your time this evening. I'm Sarah Dodson. I'm the acting transportation director, and I'm going to try to keep this under an hour or so tonight.
Thank you so much.
I'm just going to be giving a brief overview of the services and the programs that we provide with the transportation department. So the transportation department is made up of the transit and the multimodal divisions. We believe that getting around Durango is something that everyone should be able to take for granted. When a Durango resident wakes up in the morning, they should not have to worry about how they're going to get to work or how they're going to drop their kids off at school or get to the doctor. If we are doing our jobs right, there should be a safe and convenient option for every citizen and every person visiting Durango, regardless of their age or income or physical ability. Our transit division is an award-winning team, and the past few years alone, we've brought home the Outstanding Medium Transit Agency of the Year and an Outstanding Coordination Initiative for the state of Colorado, as well as the Outstanding Service Award from the Federal Transit Administration. We are a dedicated team that has someone on the road 7 days a week, no matter what the weather conditions are like, including all day today. Many of our drivers have formed strong relationships with their passengers over the years, and they take great pride in the service that they provide to the community. So Durango Transit operates 3 fixed routes 7 days a week from 7 a.m. to about 9 p.m. each day. The Fort Lewis route and the Walmart route each operate on 30-minute headways, and the Main Avenue trolley operates every 20 minutes. And in 2019, ridership on the trolley increased by 21% over 2018, which we think is due in part to being able to maintain those short 20% headways. In addition, our demand response paratransit service, called the Opportunity Bus, matches the service hours of our fixed route and provides transportation for seniors and people with disabilities within city limits, and extends out to Three Springs and Mercy. So in 2019, we gave almost 374,000 rides, trying to beat the airport, maybe next year. That's a 5% increase over our ridership in 2018, which is pretty remarkable ridership growth, considering that we did have to make service reductions in response to CDOT policy changes.
And 416.5.
And the 416.5. We continue to have a demand for increased service area and longer service hours. Certain routes, such as Fort Lewis College, are often operating at or above capacity. So ultimately, this is a good problem to have, and we look forward to working with City Council in order to identify some sustainable transit funding so that we can meet the transit needs of our community. In addition to our transit service, we have a number of programs to help make transit affordable and convenient. Our discounted transit pass program allows local agencies and community partners to purchase free ride tokens and monthly and annual passes at a discounted rate for their clients. Our partnership with 9R provides a free transit pass to students who are eligible for the free and reduced lunch program, and all students receive a $30 annual pass. Through our mobility management program, we offer individual or group travel training that helps people become familiar with our transit system, and we work closely with Pathways to Independence to offer training for students with disabilities to ride transit independently to employment opportunities and other outings. In 2020, we're going to be promoting our transit employer program, which incentivizes the use of riding transit to get to work. And you can see on our ridership survey that that was what people listed as their #1 trip purpose in 2019. The ADA transition plan was developed in 2014 based on a self-evaluation that identified around $20 million worth of upgrades to transit facilities in order to meet ADA compliance. The transition plan recommends improvement to curb ramps leading to transit stops, as well as 0.2 miles of sidewalk in either direction. So our department continually seeks grant funding to address these accessibility needs on an ongoing basis. We've also implemented a number of technological improvements in the past 2 years that improve accessibility and usability of Durango Transit. Through grant funding, we've installed signage and automatic voice announcements that display the next stop. And we now have automatic passenger counting and an app that allows passengers to know where the bus is in real time and helps them to plan their trips. This year, we're going to be rolling out an option to purchase transit fare on that app as well. So the Multimodal Division oversees a number of programs and infrastructure projects to further alternative transportation projects in Durango. The vision of the Multimodal Division is to create a fully connected transportation network that provides for an outstanding transit, bicycle, and pedestrian community in Durango. And a measure of achieving this goal is that a middle school age child would be able to safely and conveniently get around Durango independently using our transportation network. We are really lucky to live in a community that supports multimodal infrastructure projects. This broad community support allows for the implementation of the Multimodal Transportation Plan, which you guys are all aware is our guiding document for implementing transit, bicycle, and pedestrian projects. And each one of these projects was identified by the public through a years-long comprehensive process that led to the adoption of the first version of the Multimodal Transportation Plan in 2012. And in 2016, multimodal staff held another public process and updated the plan to reflect the current community needs. Our department works in collaboration with the Multimodal Advisory Board to prioritize these projects on an annual basis. Our education and outreach programs include Safe Routes to School, the Way to Go Club, the Commuter of the Month program, our Momentum e-newsletter and radio announcements, and then our annual community events like Clean Commute Week, Winter Bike to Work Day, which is February 7th, 7 to 9 a.m. in front of the studio and we also have Float to Work Day and walk and roll-a-thons. In 2019, we hosted 13 events that attracted 3,000 participants. Our 1,285 members of the Way to Go Club saved 112 tons of carbon dioxide emissions from the air in 2019. And since the program's inception in 2014, that's a total of 790 tons of carbon dioxide savings. So that's a little bit of what we do in transit and multimodal divisions. And again, thanks for your time. If you have any questions.
Thank you.
I do.
Okay.
Sarah, first of all, thank you for your work as try to get it straight, acting director.
Acting director.
Yes, thank you for that. And for your service on the Multimodal Advisory Board as the liaison. I get to benefit from the close work that you do with Spencer and others. So thank you. A couple of points, just given this. When you talk about the mission and goal that, you know, everybody has access and shouldn't worry about income or availability, that makes me, as we've discussed in multimodal boards, very much aware that some portion of transit needs to be viewed as a public good and probably will never pay for itself if it's a public good. And so I guess my question is, where are we in actually recognizing that, maybe as a council or as a city government, that there's a public good component to this?
It will definitely, I mean, you're right, public transit's never going to pay for itself, and if people were paying what it costs per ride right now, it would be at least $14 a trip, which would be incredibly cost prohibitive for, you know, we have an 83% transit dependent population and people that have a lot of income struggles. So there's always going to be an element of community support to public transit, and I 100% agree with you that it should be a right. Everyone should be able to get a ride. It doesn't pay for itself, so I think that's kind of something moving forward that we all get to work on together in the coming years, is how do we bring community partners together, and how do we just use our resources efficiently in order to make sure that we are providing transit at the lowest cost possible to the user.
Or budget appropriately.
Right.
And then my other question is, you mentioned 20 million in ADA plans, and I'm curious, how much of that 20 million in estimate, I recognize you may not be able to have the exact figure, do you believe will be covered by street and alley improvements as a result of 1A?
So these identified projects are very specific to the transit stop and the curb and 0.2 mile of sidewalk on either side. If there's an opportunity to partner with street reconstruction or sidewalk reconstruction as a part of an ongoing project that the voters approved, then we'll absolutely join in on that. And then there's a ton of different grant resources and different options out there that will be able to leverage some of the funding.
But my hunch is that a good portion of that 20 million is unfunded at present.
Correct.
Again, I just wanted to clarify that for the rest of council so that we were aware of that outstanding obligation and opportunity.
So Sarah, thank you.
Sure.
And I thoroughly enjoyed my time on the multimodal board when you were there too. That was wonderful. I would like to suggest that possibly one of the one of the possible funding mechanisms for transportation may come from sustainability. As more people live out in Three Springs and Twin Buttes, that means more cars coming in, and as more people from the region come in, it means more cars coming in. And we only have one main artery through our community, and it's going to get very crowded. And it's going to become, we will have exhaust emissions, unless everybody drives an electric car, which would be fabulous too, but that may not happen in the next 20 years. That there may be some avenue there for some sort of financing for transportation to create sustainability. And then the other thing that I was thinking about too was, last year that great electric bus was in town, and I'm sure that he took a look at those and whether or not we can do something fleet-wise with buses, which works really well. And eventually, as the Louvre has done in Paris, autonomous buses also may be a really good option. They may not work so much for passenger cars, but things that ride the same routes, and there may be some cost savings available in that area too.
Absolutely.
Sarah, can I also remind both you and Amber, I think within our budget discussions going back, we talked a little bit about looking at advertising as a potential resource, and I'm sure you guys have, we just got through the budget here recently, so
Yeah.
looking forward to hearing about maybe some opportunities there as well.
I'm looking forward to that too. The Public Information Office is working on a citywide marketing advertising policy.
Great.
So we're going to be able to piggyback off of that and explore some of those options on transit.
Awesome, thank you.
I think it's probably important to go back a little bit in time to understand how Durango was able to achieve or obtain a transit system as robust as we have today, which is unlike any other community in the Western Slope, except for Aspen and down to Glenwood that is funded with a separate real estate tax. But and that is through just efficient grant writing by staff members that allowed us to get money from CDOT to the tune of at least $800,000 a year. So over a number of years that allowed us to build this bus system as to its current state. Then we heard 3 years ago or 4 years ago now that CDOT really wanted to reapportion some of that money, give it to other communities that weren't so didn't have grant writers like we had at the time to get that money. And so they reallocated to different communities around the state, and we lost out. And that funding mechanism went away over the past 4 years, 3 years actually. So that's the state we're in now. We're looking for, they teed us up, they got us a bus system. I mean, you don't go to Cortez and ride a bus, you don't go to Pagosa Springs and ride a bus. Durango is unique in that capability. So we just need to figure out a way to sustain ourselves in the future. I might say too that the CDOT gave us $4 million to create the transit center. It was built on city property, so it was a partnership of that. In that sense, we gave the property, they put up $4 million for us to build that facility that was meant to be a regional hub of transportation in Southwest Colorado. And it still can be. About the week we opened it, however, I think the Greyhound went out of business, or what the equivalent to Greyhound went out of business. And so that's something we really need to work on too, is that regional partnership for transportation issues, so that we can.
And we do have, so the Mustang Outrider that's operated by CDOT and then it's passed through the Roadrunner,
Right.
they are operating regional service and using the transit center currently. So there's daily trips to Grand Junction via Rico and Telluride currently. Yeah, I totally agree. I think if there's a really good opportunity to form a lot of partnerships, and that's going to help us with resource use and all of it.
We've been lucky, we just need to keep it up. That's all. That's the moral.
Thank you so much for the presentation. We appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Okay, moving on to 5.2, Consensus Committee.
Good evening, counselors. You all know me, but for the audience, I'm Sandy Irwin. I'm the director of the library.
I'm Dan Armentano, planner with the Community Development Department.
We are part of the La Plata County Complete Census Count Committee. We're here to talk to you a little bit about what is happening currently with the census.
So obviously this is a nationwide process, happens every 10 years. Here locally in La Plata County, we do have our own Complete Count Committee. The Board of County Commissioners adopted a resolution to create this committee. It is countywide. Last month, we had been meeting for a few months prior to that as well. The committee right now is comprised of government and community leaders. We've got folks from education field, business, community, healthcare, and several community organizations. Some of the goals of the committee are to develop and implement an awareness campaign about the importance of the census and the importance of getting a complete and correct count. We're also identifying some of the harder to reach populations in the county, particularly in the city. That's college students that live off campus, some of the folks that live full-time in hotels here in Durango, and make sure that those folks are being counted as part of this process. Again, with the goal of ensuring a complete and accurate count in the community. So
why are we, the people, on your local census committee? As the library, the census has changed where they are asking people to either do it online or over the phone. It will take an effort to get a mail, to get it in the mail and to be able to fill out that paper form. So a lot of people in La Plata County still don't have broadband internet. Many people still have dial-up. So libraries, not just the Durango Public Library, but all libraries are participating in promoting the census and will be providing access for people who don't have access to it.
Speaking for Vicki and myself as representatives of the Community Development Department, the census data is really important for us to kind of plan for how the community is going to continue to grow. It provides a ton of demographic information that's really useful for us. That's part of the reason why I'm on it. Vicki this is actually her third census, so this is her third time being on this Complete Count Committee, so she's very experienced in what the hard to reach populations are in Durango as well. So.
And Mitchell, who is up in the booth. Hello, Mitchell. He is part of our city's public information office, and he is working with the other PIOs in the area, and they're getting the word out about the census. So it's really important to get the information out. You know, you were just talking about transit funding. A lot of that is dependent upon population and an accurate census count. So the more accurate census count we can get, the better off we are with getting grants and a variety of other things. And we'll talk a little bit about that more in a moment. One of the big pushes right now is for jobs. There are jobs that are available for people to work for the census. You can go to their website, 2020census.gov/jobs. Concerns that some people have that they shouldn't have. Will they lose their benefits? So people who might be on the SNAP program, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, the Children's Health Insurance Program, Medicaid, your benefits are not affected if you work for the census. And the pay is fairly decent. You're making from $16 to $22 an hour. You're getting reimbursed for mileage. So these are great jobs. You can work full-time, part-time, but they really need local people to work for the census. So we strongly encourage people to go online and apply for those jobs and know that your benefits will not be affected. That's an important thing for everybody to know.
Just to go into a little more detail on why an accurate count is so important. First, congressional representation is determined by the census results, specifically in the House of Representatives. There's 435 representatives, and those seats are basically divvied up on how the census results determine where the populations are state by state. Billions or even trillions in federal funding is dispersed based on the census data. This is for everything from schools, housing, infrastructure, transportation, and so on. And that's all determined by where the need is, as determined by the census. On a more local level, I touched on this a little bit, but demographic information provided by this data is really important for us for informing our city policy decisions. And then, of course, it is required by our Constitution. So there is that. We have a short video that we'll show you here.
What is the 2020 census? Every 10 years, the census records everyone living in this country. It's written in the Constitution and comes in a questionnaire that counts everyone who lives at your address on April 1st. The data can be used to inform funding for services like fire stations, schools, clinics, and representation that affect your community.
How will 2020 census data be used? Where there are more people, there are more needs for public services. That's why the census is used by the government to inform funding decisions each year. But that's not all. It's also used by nonprofits to inform services, by businesses to create jobs, and even by students for school projects. Understanding how the population changes helps us shape communities across the country for the better.
How does the 2020 census affect representation? There are 435 seats in the House of Representatives. These get distributed to the 50 states by population, and an accurate census response helps your state get the right amount of seats. States with smaller populations get at least one, while states with larger populations might get more.
How do I take the 2020 census? In March 2020, every address in the country will receive an invitation to complete a simple questionnaire, and there are 3 ways to respond. Number 1, do it online. Number 2, call by phone. Number 3, send it by mail. For those who don't respond, a census taker from your community will follow up and assist you.
Is my 2020 census data safe? After sending your census response, your personal information is kept safe. By law, it can't be shared with any other government agency, law enforcement, or landlord. No one. So take your 2020 census with peace of mind. Shape your future. Start here. Visit 2020census.gov.
We will be visiting with council as the months go on, at least once a month, to update you on what's happening with the census. But do you have any questions for us that we can try to answer right now? Yes, Barbara.
For us and also for the audience who might be listening, can you give some examples of the kinds of questions that will and will not be asked on the census?
We know there's not a citizenship question. Otherwise, no, we have not seen the census form as of yet. Have you seen the census form? I have not.
I have not.
How will it differ from previous census, from previous census?
I can't speak to
One piece is that I saw something today where they will allow people who are in a same-sex marriage be able to declare that they are married. So that's one thing I know. I haven't seen the full census yet, but we will come back to you next month and we can see if we can find out more information. But we know there's not a citizenship question on there. There is one on the American Community Survey, which is not it comes from the census, but on the official 2020 census, there's not a question on there. Also, when people are doing the census, as was shown in the video, your information is encrypted, and so there's a lot of protections that were put in. I was very concerned about that when I went to a conference for libraries back in September. We had a whole session about the census, and knowing that people are very concerned about their privacy, about their information getting out there, about anybody being able to access that information. And everything is encrypted. It's a very strong encryption, and they cannot share with another agency. If somebody who works for the census shares that information or does something or fills out your form for you, which they cannot do, it's a $250,000 fine and time in jail. So I don't think anybody who works for the Census Bureau will be sharing that information.
Thank you.
Any other questions about the census?
Do you know how many people they're hiring here locally?
A lot, hundreds.
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 And-
When I looked in December, they were hoping to get over 600 people.
And from what area, what time frame are they working, from what period?
They would start in February. So they want to start training in February and March, and then it would go all the way until midsummer. So through
Like middle of July is kind of basically the end of the count. So you can't be counted after a certain date. I want to say July 15th.
Are they part-time jobs or full-time jobs?
They can be either.
Either, okay.
And is a car required?
Depends on the job, I'm sure, but I think if people go online to the census site, so 2020census.gov, they can find out more information. Plus the folks from the census, they have some recruiters who are trying to get out to the community. As a matter of fact, we had a couple at the library today, and they can answer your questions or people's questions more thoroughly about what they need. But if they do own a car, they will get reimbursed for mileage if they're having to drive.
And the last is, I'm assuming our unhoused community, that there'll be workers going out to the various locations.
So they do a special count.
They don't have, okay.
They have a day where they are working with local agencies to get the count of our unhoused community. So they have a process in place for that to happen.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you for the update, for updating our community. All right, we're moving on to review of the consent agenda. This part of the agenda is intended to allow City Council by a single motion to approve items that are considered routine or non-controversial. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member requests that an item be removed from the consent agenda. Ms. Phillips, can we have roll call, please? Or please read the consent agenda.
You bet. Item 6.1 is approval of the minutes for the regular meeting of January 7, 2020. 6.2 is discussion and possible action concerning Resolution R 2020-2, authorizing the creation of a project and an additional appropriation in the Airport Capital Projects Fund for aircraft rescue firefighting foam testing equipment.
Thank you. Do we have any councilor that would like to remove an item from the agenda this evening, consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll look for a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second?
Okay, now may we have a roll call, please, Ms. Phillips?
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Baxter?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Bricky?
Yes.
And Mayor Youssef?
Yes. Okay, we are moving all the way down to, we have no public hearings this evening. Moving down to item 12.1, Ms. Kathy Metz, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Good evening, Mayor Youssef and members of City Council. I just wanted to provide a brief overview. We have talked quite a bit about the adoption of the 2020 Parks, Open Space, Trails, and Recreation Master Plan, but I just thought it might be helpful, just as a reminder to the council, why it's important that we adopt this document tonight. The update of the existing master plan, which was originally created and adopted by the City Council in 2010, started 2.5 years ago in September 2017. And I think that there was an expectation of the community after this process that we would adopt a new master plan. The Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, the Natural Lands Preservation Advisory Board, and the Planning Commission have reviewed the 2020 master plan, and they have recommended to the City Council to adopt this plan. Following the 2-2 split of the City Council, on October 1st. Chapter 8, which was encompassing the financial analysis of the master plan, was rewritten by the consultants and gave more clarity about the differences between the master plan, a strategic plan, and the annual budget, as well as identified projects that could be accomplished in the term of this master plan, which is up to 10 years, with the available funding sources. The master plan should be kept current and updated every 5 to 10 years because it is an element of the City of Durango Comprehensive Plan. The timing of the adoption is critical because the department is getting reaccredited this year. We were originally accredited in 2015 and our visitors are coming back to Durango this year. And many of the standards that are a part of the national accreditation are tied to the master plan. The department accreditation as well as the master plan demonstrates to our community that the department meets the highest national standards for best practice. The master plan and accreditation also helps secure external funding such as grants that eases the financial burden to the city. The master plan and accreditation improves our overall efficiency and operations within the department because it sets in an environment where there's continual review of operations, policies, and procedures, and that promotes an atmosphere of continuous improvement in our department. In essence, it holds the department accountable to the public and ensures responsiveness to meet community needs. The master plan provides an organized and process-based system to develop the goals of the department. And while maintaining flexibility, it provides a roadmap or tool for the advisory boards, city council, and staff to identify future projects for the future. The master plan has been shown to be supported by our community as evidenced in 2015 by the reauthorization of the original tax that we passed in 1999, dedicated for parks and recreation purposes. The master plan and the community has supported the document and understands also that this is a living document and it will change over time as conditions evolve and in no way binds this council or others financially. The master plan was invested by the city to create it in the amount of $156,000. And the Parks and Recreation Department has maintained a current master plan. Originally in 2001 was our first, and then that was updated in 2010, and now we have the current version in 2020. Failure to adopt the master plan discounts a significant amount of time and energy that was invested by the advisory boards, stakeholders, and our community. There's a lot of documentation before you. I'm certainly open to answer any questions of the City Council, but I'll stop my presentation at this point and look to Council for questions.
Thank you. And I think it's wise probably if you stay with us for this discussion in case there's questions.
Of course.
Further discussion. Thank you very much. Are there any questions regarding process for this? Councilor Nosler.
And not so much on process, but I do have some observations to share and some considerations for council to think about.
Okay, great. Okay, that would be helpful.
You want me to just go ahead?
Sure.
Good. Thank you, actually, for your presentation. I wanted to just kind of share this with you, and I'll kind of talk you through. I'm going to pass these down, and if I'm short, I'll give you one as soon as we finish, but I did not make these available to the team to take notes. What I wanted to do is, you know, I did not support the master plan as it was presented. Oh, thanks. Oh, sorry. Thank you. So I just passed out a document that I'm going to kind of go over with some proposed language that I think might be something we might want to consider. So, you know, I did not support the master plan when it first came out for a variety of reasons. Mainly, I would say that we have differing views of what constitutes a plan and a master plan, and I think there's a recognition of that. But I thought, you know, I always try to work at how to get to yes. So I wanted to think about what, for myself, would I like to see in this document that could maybe get me to a yes. But I also wanted to present what I still see as some major issues that I think we need to consider And so forgive me, I'm going through pages, they're written on the document, it's like 7 or 5 of 295 or something like that. But if you look at page 5 of 295, which is in our pages that are presented here, it says the consulting team identified the following capital projects to be initiated within the next 5 to 10 years using the available dedicated funding sources. And the issues I have with this is that the projects total as much as $195 million, with Durango Mesa listed at $1.5 million. If you remove them, and I'm not suggesting we do that, but if you take that big item out, the proposed list is still $90 million in estimated costs, and that far exceeds the available resources over the next 10 years. The projects don't include Camino del Rio or other significant projects that were proposed as those listed for the next 5 to 10 years. And that while the community indicated it prefers that 30% of its tax dollars be used on maintenance, this does not provide for 30% maintenance of park and rec assets. And then inflation and construction is not taken in. That's one issue. I have 2 more, but I have some suggestions that I think could get us to a yes, or at least me to a yes. The next one is pages 6 to 7. It lists the future capital improvement projects, and total of all these projects is currently estimated at $332,472,880. And my concerns with this section is that the term future could be misleading, and I would prefer to see the word potential. And that by my calculations, we may have 55 to 60 million from 2015 dedicated tax over the next 10 years, which is far below the 332.4 million in listed items. And that while multimodal projects qualify for 2015 tax dollars, they only account for 28 million of the 332.4 in the listed. And again, this is, it doesn't account for inflation or increased construction. And I see this more as a master list of opportunities, but not a plan with an implementation timeline. And the last thing, I'm trying to be quick, but I wanted to be thorough. And it says on page 197 of the 295 pages, prior to the sunset of the 2015 half-cent sales tax and use tax, and the 2015 quarter-cent sales and use tax, the city should ask voters to permanently continue the dedicated funding source. And I have concerns about this because, we have structural problems, and I don't think it's appropriate for us to think about eliminating other potential uses for sales tax dollars when these existing funds might expire. So I have 6 recommendations that I'd like us to consider as making as an amendments to this document in both the executive section and other appropriate sections, including Chapter 8. So, Kathy, while you said it in no way binds the city, I didn't find that language, so maybe I missed it, but I didn't find that language in the document.
You did miss it.
Okay, so if I missed it, I didn't see it in Section 8, nor did I see it in the executive session. So I'd like to know, I'd like to see that it's in the executive section and Section 8, that this list of potential projects in no way binds this city council or any future city council to implementing any of the projects listed herein. I'd like to see that through this, number 2, that through this process, the consulting team identified $332.4 million present value in potential projects, and funding from the 2015 dedicated tax, however, may provide 55 to 60 million in new construction and capital maintenance projects for parks and rec multimodal activities over the next 10 years, basically indicating that it's a list of many possibilities, but that our funds are limited. The third item would be that while the community indicated it prefers that 30% of its tax dollars be used on maintenance, this list of projects does not provide for 30% maintenance of parks and rec, multimodal, or open space assets. Item 4, in some instances, it may be more appropriate for the private sector to develop and operate items on this master list. The City of Durango welcomes private sector development of items listed within this document. 2 more items yet. While the consulting team recognizes there is a decline stage in which programs should be terminated, this document does not recommend any items to be discontinued. This city council recognizes that some programs offered may no longer be feasible or represent the city's determination of highest and best use of its assets and resources, Thus, some programs described in this document may need to be terminated in the future. And finally, this city council recognizes there are competing uses for dedicated sales tax dollars and will not at this time ask voters to permanently continue these two dedicated sources. Continuation or discontinuation of these dedicated sources of funding will be up to future city councils and Durango voters to decide. And that's just something I put a bit of thought into it as to where would I feel comfortable giving my endorsement, and these are my suggested amendments to this document to be clearly stated in, executive session or executive section, and probably in the section 8.
Okay. Thank you, Councilman Noseworthy. Thoughts from council or further discussion?
I think Councilor Noseworthy's suggestions are wonderful, and I think that they do address most of the questions that both Councilor Noseworthy and I had. I would also like to say that there's actually more in support of those conversations. The step 3 of setting the implementation timelines, that there's a statement 5 to 10 years using the available dedicated funding source that we would connect the Animas River Trail to the existing Smart 160 Trail in Grandview, which I'm guessing is Three Springs. Lake Nighthorse Recreation Phase Development, Durango Mesa Park Phase Development, which, as Councilor Noseworthy pointed out, is $105 million possibly. Community Center Recreation Expansion or development of a new facility in Three Springs, which I believe the facility in Three Springs was approximately $40 million. And I don't remember the Community Recreation Center expansion dollars. And then the Community Park Phase Development in Three Springs. If you add those 5 things up that were the top 5 recommendations in this category, it far exceeds the amount of funds that will be available through the dedicated sales tax. And I can't support the idea that we're suggesting we spend more money than we're going to be earning, and that we really need to budget ourselves to our available dollars. The other thing that I was concerned about is 7.11, and this is the old document, it's not the new one, I believe. The department overview. So it shows an overview of the department with their multitude of responsibilities. So it lists all the regional parks and the fitness programs and the staff and the advisory boards. And then it lists the indoor facilities. So we have the recreation center, special use facility at Chapman Hill, Durango Gymnastics, the Mason Center, and the Moore Park Shop. And then in addition to that, it also maintains outdoor facilities, so pavilions, dog park, basketball court, tennis courts, et cetera. And I have not been able to find a complete analysis of what this will cost to operate and maintain year by year through the end of the tax. And I would like to say that I think that that's a very significant sum of money, and it will impact the amount of dollars available for the capital projects that are suggested on the other page that we discussed. So I think that we need to also have a very significant discussion here in the plan about the difference between expansion of all of our facilities and expansion of all the things that we provide versus how do we maintain it and how do we sustain it over time, particularly if the sales taxes are not re-upped for those purposes. So those are my concerns that I don't think the new narrative that was written in Chapter 8 addresses.
Councilors? Feedback?
Do you have any response, Kathy, or good over there?
I don't know that I heard a question, but I certainly have thoughts about what was said by Councilor Noseworthy and Councilor Baxter. Do you want me to go through those?
Yeah.
That'd be very helpful.
Good, and I do have a comment, and I think we follow up.
So in terms of where's the statement about that this is a living document and it will evolve over time, if you look on page 179, it does talk about this being a living document and that it is a list of possible projects and that it talks about the difference between the master plan, strategic plan, and the annual budget. And so...
But it doesn't say that it does not bind. Your language in the cover page indicates that it does not bind the city council to anything, and I could not find that language anywhere. The living document I saw.
It's a living document, it's a roadmap and a tool. And so that is the one in the same. I think that the council knows where they are bound by a particular issue is when it's in an adopted budget rather than in a plan. Many of the city's planning documents have a vision for the future, as we did in 2010. And we have actually accomplished many of the recommendations of the 2010 master plan, but not all of them. And so some of those original visions have carried forward into this 2020 plan, and some are brand new, like Durango Mesa Park is brand new. Lake Nighthorse is brand new. And that wasn't mentioned during our 2010. That's why it's a living document. So the second item that we talked about here with Councilor Noseworthy's, that the consultant team did list.
Okay, wait till the end.
The total number of projects that could be funded. And again, the consultants were not tasked with this master plan to prioritize projects because we have a really good process that we do with our community, our advisory boards, and the community input every year that's kind of captured in the strategic plan, and then that builds to our annual budget. So the consultants really listened to our community to make sure all of the projects were identified, and so that as things move forward and we're ready to go forward with either funding or community partnerships, it's already been identified in this overarching visionary plan. So that addresses the second one. In terms of the maintenance costs, in the list of capital projects, that just talks about future capital projects. It doesn't address ongoing maintenance. That is managed in our operating budget, which is separate from the capital improvements list. If the council remembers, I provided a 20-year summary to the city council of not only operating budget but future capital costs that picked up these $332 million worth of possible projects, as well as the ongoing maintenance of our existing facilities, because we know as much as the council does that the community does expect us to maintain the facilities that we have today first before we look to expand to the future. In regard to private sector and other partnerships with public entities, I think that we've demonstrated that we have certainly done that in many instances already with the department, and will continue to do that. And that is also mentioned in the financial analysis, how we'll continue to engage in that process in the future. Let's see, the next one was sort of the declining stage of programs. We absolutely monitor that every year in our annual budget in terms of the Parks and Recreation staff. Certainly do discontinue programs that are declining and add new that are visionary and up and emerging programs into the future. So we do that on an annual basis to look at those opportunities to make sure that we can continue to meet the 90% cost recovery that we've historically met since the adoption of the previous master plan. And then the last thing in terms of the voters will approve any reauthorization of this tax or future tax. It will not be something that is going to come before this council today or in the adoption of this master plan. However, the consultants recognize the success of the department and the success of our community has been tied to those dedicated funding sources that's allowed us to accomplish great things and attracted many people to Durango. So that's my response to Councilor Noseworthy's comments. And then in terms of the amount of expenditures recommended, again, that's part of the annual budget, Councilor Baxter, that we do. And in terms of that, and the maintenance of our existing facilities is also managed annually in the budget.
Great. Thank you for those answers. Can I hear from the other councilors?
I think we have a fundamental difference in opinion about what the purpose, content, and format of a master plan is. You know, that's similar to our housing master plan. I mean, if you want to insert these council directives, I mean, like number 6, the city council recognizes all those things are, this is not a city council document for one. This is 2 years of public engagement and deliberation by 2 boards, appointed boards, and it's been brought before us for adoption. And so I think to insert some of these items, which I love your thought and consideration, but I do think they're relatively implicit. And certainly we're not tying a future council to anything in any other manner other than similar to a housing master plan or a number of the other master plans that we have adopted in the past. So I appreciate the opportunity because I was the council member that was missing I was actually in Spain that evening, and but I've watched read the minutes, watched what went on that evening, and I really appreciate the opportunity to review and act on this revised master plan, which is the culmination of 2 years of public engagement and deliberation by 2 advisory panels. And I'm prepared to make a motion if that's
If I may counter both Kathy's comments and, Ms. Metz's comments and Dean Brookie for a moment. First of all, in the agenda documentation, it explicitly says the Parks, Open Space, Trails, and Recreation Master Plan in no way binds this city council or others. Yet you're not willing to put that same statement in a document. You talk about it being a living document, but I want to convey to the public that we recognize that this is $344 million, and that's different from the housing plan because that doesn't have a $344 million price tag of possibilities. So I think it's important to convey to the public that this is a document, as you say, a guiding document. We recognize it is a huge list of possibilities. We recognize we don't have these kind of dollars available. It's going to require other plans drilling down on this, but these are possibilities that we can consider, that the future funding is not certain, that there are other possibilities that could be necessary, and that it's a guiding document with a huge list, and to what Councilor Baxter said about not necessarily including the future operating costs for all these expansions. I have real concerns about conveying to the public that we are not setting out to go willy-nilly with $332 million in projects that are listed here. And I propose this as a way of helping clarify what this document represents, because I do not think it's clear. I don't think it's implicit or clear to the public from what I've been hearing from people. So I offer it as an opportunity, as a way of getting to yes. That's all I have to say on that.
Councilor Patine.
Well, I think, thank you, Councilor Noseworthy, for all of this work, and I don't want to dismiss the efforts made here on trying to articulate changes in the plan that would be acceptable to you. I think, that my only challenge with this particular timing is the timing, probably more than anything, and the fact that we have a process in place. It's been going on for almost 3 years to approve this plan. It's something that the city has developed over a long period of time. It involves a tremendous amount of public energies and resources, including a lot of participation from not just the boards that are part of it, but all of the other community members that have come to all of the sessions that weigh in on this. And so I think this board has always been reluctant to sort of adjudicate from the dais at this stage of the game. And though some of these suggestions don't strike me as things that I might have considered along the way, or certainly the boards could have considered along the way at the time when they were reviewing it, I do feel that, they have not had an opportunity to review your notes here. They have not had the opportunity to weigh in on the import of some of these items that you'd like to change here. And I think they should have if we were to sit up here and make changes like this. And we could have potentially done that the last time they had an opportunity to discuss this, which they've done. They went back and they heard our last discussion and they made suggestions on revisions that were acceptable to them, which is why you see a new document in front of you. And I think, I could echo the sentiments of Mayor Pro Tem Brookie and just say that, it is a philosophical difference, I think, about the way that this plan is constructed and what it means in terms of its long-term visionary aspect compared to perhaps a couple of the counselors on the dais would like to see it be more specific, certainly with more specificity relative to this document. I'm very comfortable with the process we have in place, which is you have a visionary document that is very much seated in a number of other documents in the community, which make up essentially a community master plan as a whole, which includes things like housing plans and facilities master plans and transportation plans, and all the plans. And this is really a similar document to all of those documents. It's just done in similar format and so forth. And then you have a 5-year strategic plan that these boards will also contend with, which gets you down to another level of specificity in terms of what are the achievable goals within real 5-year numbers. And then you start to deal with things like present values and implications of, what are the maintenance repercussions of pursuing these things on a 5-year plan. And then you further get down to an annual process, which as part of my update for the council this evening would have been, but I'll just say it now, the Parks and Recreation Board is in the process right now, today. Their last meeting, the whole content of it was contending with what are going to be their recommendations for capital projects for the next budget, 2021. And so that's a long and tedious process that they all spend a lot of time going through and making their best recommendations based on, really a lot of those people have been on that board for a very long time, and they have a lot more experience, candidly, than I do in managing the process. And certainly then you add the staff and all their expertise and excellence and their elite level accreditation that's relevant to that, and you put that all in the pot and you get down to a annual plan, essentially, which is the budget. And that budget certainly contends with present values. That budget certainly contends with achievable aspects of what the capital availability is and what the maintenance requirements are. And I'm very comfortable with that. I think that's why I voted for the plan prior to its revision. So I don't have a lot of comments on the revision because though I'm comfortable with the new revisions, I was also comfortable the way this process works. And I think that's the basis of the philosophical difference, is just a comfort level with the community process. I don't want to go back and say, hey, community, you went through this entire process, which you've all spent so many hours, so many more hours than we've spent contending with this. And that's why we have those boards and commissions, that's why they're there. That's why we have professional staff with their multi-decade level of experience here. And to take that out and say that, I know better, I don't feel that I do, candidly. I don't feel that I can make these kinds of revisions at this late in the game. So, I'm certainly ready to have somebody make a motion. Anybody wants to make a motion, I'm happy to make a motion. We have to discuss that anyways, but.
May I offer another alternative?
Sure.
Thank you. Yeah, and I recognize that I'm providing this. I got the information last week and was only able to address it this quickly. I'd like to suggest that, this is a $156,000 expenditure of taxpayer dollars, and it has been involved several years. And I'd like to ask the council to consider a continuance, to take this, to have a 2-week period, to bring this to the advisory board, to share my suggested amendments to them, and to see what objections they would have to amending the document to a level that would give me more comfort in providing an imprimatur to this document.
I would just respond. I'm ready to vote on this as it stands today, so I would not want to recognize a continuance. We've certainly had plenty of time with this document and with the revised document to be able to at least vote on it and see whether we have enough votes for it to pass. But the other question I had, and I appreciate you mentioning that because I was going to suggest that as well. I do think that your suggestions ought to go back to the advisory boards. They may be watching tonight, but at least they can see what it is. And I don't know if there's a process by which they could consider that and make revisions after the fact. I don't want to hold up the approval of this document, which is so critical and has been outlined to you tonight, to future funding of parks and recreation and open space in our community and their accreditation and everything else that sort of hinges upon that. And you look at the history of the grant funding aspect of that just as one small piece of it, and what is it, Kathy, it's like $18 million that just we've gotten from GOCO over the many years that the community really didn't have to spend of our tax money. And those dollars are really predicated on having plans in place. And so I don't want to hold this up. I think we're at least ready to vote on something. And if we don't have the votes to do it, then so be it. We can certainly go to the continuance concept. But I'm ready to make a motion to approve. I do make a motion to approve this plan.
I'll second that motion, noting that, there's no downside, in my opinion, to this master plan. I mean, if any of these 6 items that are being proposed to be inserted rose to the occasion, as Councilor Bettine suggested, if, that board can suggest an amendment to this master plan at any point in time. We do that frequently. Amend housing master plans, transportation master plans, et cetera. And I have particular concerns about the, is beyond the discussion here tonight about a couple of the, especially when city council, number 6 particularly, but that I would not like to have inserted specifically into this document. Because this is not city council's document. This is the community's document. So I just second the motion.
May I question, Councilor Brookie, your comment that this is not a city council document? If we are adopting it, then what is it? I mean, why does it need our adoption if it's not a city council document?
City council is not tasked with the drafting of the narrative that goes into this document. That was a professional firm that was hired. They conducted 2.5 years of public engagement. It's been reviewed by the 2 boards twice, and I think we're ready to vote on it.
But by voting on it, we're approving the narrative.
Correct. We are approving it. We are not writing it.
I recognize we didn't write it, but if we adopt it, how would it not become, we're all giving it our endorsement if it's adopted. How has it not become a city council?
Your statement, this city council recognizes there are competing uses of dedicated sales tax dollars and will not at this time ask voters permanently to continue these dedicated tax resources. There's nothing in here prior that says we did.
No, but it says that we should ask voters to permanently continue the dedicated funding source. That's what it says in the document.
If I could just add, I appreciate, Councilor Noseworthy, your attempt to get to a yes. I really do, actually, because I think that this is so important, and the timing of this is so important for our community that it would be nice if we had a consensus, if you would, or unanimous consensus, if you would, but it's not necessary. But I appreciate that. That said, I would echo some of the concerns discussed by councilors this evening with some of your recommendations. There would be a lot that would need to be considered before we would remove, for example, the Durango Mesa Park.
I didn't suggest that.
From our, but you're mentioning it here in one as much as, and obviously that has massive implications.
Oh, but I'm not suggesting, and I said that, I'm not suggesting it be removed. I'm just giving an example of the amount of dollars. So if you even took out that, which I suggested we not do, it would be less.
So if you could let me finish.
Okay.
Because it's hard to keep your, everyone has a line of thought, and that's why we try not to interrupt, to let people go. But my concern, I think what I've heard in the past, there's been lots of discussion about the price tag of this, the fact that we have over $300,000 in projects listed, and that we know we will not make that much money to be able to fund all of those. And I've heard Kathy Metz, our Director of Parks and Recreation, respond that it's intentional, that it's a visionary document. We are intentionally including projects, because to get to the point where we are excluding at this level, that's a different process, that's a different job. I have been involved in the processes of prioritizing on the Parks and Recreation Board as a past Parks and Rec Board member, and I appreciate those processes very much, and I see that. I remember being on the board in 2015 when we were saying, even back then in 2016, we need a new Parks and Rec master plan, because at the time we were talking about paddleboarding, it wasn't even in our 2010 plan. It changes so much. And we were talking about Lake Nighthorse, and none of this was even in our old plan, and we were talking about in 6 years how old that plan already felt. So I really understand the need to get a new plan in place, especially with the timing of the accreditation. And, I think that I see, while there's particular desires to see differences in this plan, I think that it's been very well vetted at this time. I would suggest, I think that it's gone back, and like Councilor Bettine said, I appreciate the advisory boards and our staff reconsidering and making changes as you've done. I appreciate you taking the time to do that. I think that I really appreciate the process also that went into this, the time, and the effort of a lot of community residents. And I see a significant amount of public benefit and common good that is being gained by these plans. I mean, really, our Parks and Recreation Department has done really great things for our community, and it's because of its, we want it to be accredited, and it does. Most importantly on the accreditation to me is the access to external funding, and I really appreciate that. I see no negative implications of approving this plan. I see processes that we have in place that allow us to get to exactly where you want to get, where we will get to with time, with the strategic plan, 5-year strategic plan, and the annual plan, and our approval of the budget annually. That's another level of our review, that we get to every single year review everything. So this can be a guiding document, and I guarantee in 6 years, there'll be something else that we won't have thought of, that this will already be old. But each year we have, I think that as a council, we have an opportunity to dive down into the details like you've done here. And so that this plan is intentionally meant to be a guiding, visionary document, and that's just what it is. It doesn't bind us as councilors, because we will annually approve these documents. So I just wanted to take my opportunity to suggest this, to throw in my 2 cents. And I also wanted to really appreciate, once again, staff and all of the people who were involved in this. I mean, I know that there was quite a few teams. We had the master plan project staff, the steering committee members, in addition to the pros consulting team and the RPI, and a lot of staff time. I know it hasn't been easy, and you brought it here once, and you're bringing it here again. And so I'm ready to see this. I'm ready to see this get moved forward, and let the Parks and Recreation move on to their work, and let us move on to our work.
So one last thing that I would like to say is that I mentioned in an email fairly recently, but in the last couple of weeks, it was a follow-up to my original request to have some changes to the master plan that I would support. And what I stated in that email was similar to what Councilor Brookie said tonight, which is that we do have a fundamental difference in our understanding of what strategic plans and master plans do, what they're for, what their form is. And I look forward to council having a conversation about that so that we can be aligned on what an RFP looks like for a plan or a study. And so that when the plans or studies are completed and brought to council or through the advisory boards, that the conversation is not about the form, the conversation is about the content. And it's not about what a strategic plan means, it's about what is in the strategic plan. Because I believe that this is part of the challenge, is that we're actually having 2 separate conversations here, and it's causing some challenges in agreeing to the plan as it is. So that would be my recommendation, that we move forward in that manner in the future.
I mean, some of that we have to leave to staff too, in terms of the goals and the purpose of a master plan of that nature. I mean, this is a firm that does this as, their primary source of business. They are professionals. They do this for a number of communities, and there's certain alignments that compare certain other communities, and how a master plan like this is created. And
I'm not going to disagree with you,
what
but I
goes
don't
into
think
it.
we benchmarked.
And so, in that effort, I mean, we can't create, council should not be in the business of trying to define, unless, we can ask for certain specific things, but the format and the purpose of the master plan is sort of a universal thing. I mean, that's done throughout communities all throughout Colorado, much less the nation. So we don't want to create a document that can't be compared to other communities' documents. I mean, this is a format and a purpose, and it's a Parks and Rec master plan.
Well, I would respectfully disagree with you that council shouldn't be in the place of asking for definitions of what strategic plans are, what master plans are, and agree and actually giving guidance on what that looks like, because we are the ones who have to approve them, and we're the ones who use them to guide us. And I don't believe that we have actually benchmarked other communities as to what they do, and that we don't know that our plans compare with other communities or don't compare with other communities. And I'm not talking specifically about one plan, I'm talking about in general. And if we don't know that, then I don't think that we can state that. So I believe we need to have that conversation and have some information about that.
I'm ready for that conversation.
Good. Do you have that information? I would guess that you do.
Yes.
I'm not asking.
Well, I am curious about what Kathy just.
Our master plan does benchmark other communities, specifically Golden is listed, Steamboat, Flagstaff, Grand Junction. These are our comparable cities, and they looked at a number of benchmark items that specifically relate to what we do in Parks and Recreation in terms of expenditures, number of staff, cost recovery, those sort of performance factors. So that is identified in this master plan, and the other communities found it helpful, and we certainly did as well.
So that wasn't actually the question that I was asking. I understand that the plan benchmarks other communities. That was not my suggestion. My suggestion was about what a strategic plan should look like, not what happens in other communities or how we compare to them, but the plan itself. So thank you.
And I would venture that I believe Councilor Brookie's comment was, how does this master plan compare to other master plans in other communities? Which I don't know that we have that information. So, but I recognize that we benchmark other communities.
As we should.
One of the things that I would share with you is that I am a national gold medal judge for the National Recreation and Park Association, and every year I read the top communities in the United States application for the gold medal award, which we won in 2012. I have read many master plans that other communities have prepared, the ones that are the best in the nation, as we are. And so I'm very familiar with what master plans look like, what strategic plans look like, and I believe that we have prepared a document that meets those national standards.
Great. I appreciate the discussion, and I think it's been robust and thorough, and we have a motion and a second on the table. And I think
Who motioned?
I did.
Chris made a motion, Dean made the second, and I think we're ready for a roll call. Ms. Phillips?
Mayor Pro Tem Brookie,
Yes.
Councilor Patine,
Yes.
Councilor Baxter,
No.
Councilor Noseworthy,
No?
Mayor Youssef.
Yes. All right. Thank you for the discussion around that. Moving on to Amber Blake, Interim City Manager, City Status Update.
Councilors, my update this week is quite short. I wanted to let you know that we have our interim finance director hired and here in Durango. So Wayne is the new head of our finance department, and I will be bringing him to the meeting to present to you and just tell you a little bit about himself at the next council meeting. And we are excited to have him on board. He is ready to hit the ground running, and we'll be moving forward with finalizing the budget and looking at all of our processes and procedures in the finance department to make sure that we have our best practices in place and everything in alignment. I don't, I'm completely blanking on it. He's here in the audience if you'd like me to bring him up, but I was gonna give him a couple weeks to get his feet on the ground.
No, it's okay, I just, so that if I heard the full name, I would recognize it again.
Come on up, Wayne.
Well, I'm very happy to be here.
Thank you for joining us.
As an interim, that's what I do now. My past history has been, I worked for Bank of America for 26 years and was in charge of the Texas portion of their management information and budget. And then I retired from Bank of America and was city manager of Granbury, Texas, which is a small town, much like Durango. And I was finance director there for 5 years and city manager for 5 years. And I retired from there. And I enjoy retirement, but I also enjoy still getting back into the action. And so I do interim work. And that's what I'm here for tonight.
And what is your last name?
McKeffin. Yeah, Wayne McKeffin.
Thank you very much, and we're glad you're here.
Nice to
Welcome.
meet you.
Yeah, very
glad
nice.
to meet you.
Welcome.
Nice to meet you, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
Okay. Item 12.2.2, Amber.
All right, and that is my update. Wayne is here. We are reviewing everything and did we have another one? What else is our other item? Oh my God, I have an old agenda.
I think we
Sorry,
have an old
I do.
agenda
I have
here.
an old agenda. We have the train lot lease.
Yes.
Sorry. I think there's nothing there. So we have the attached lease agreement with the Durango Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad. And that was in your packets. The train has signed that agreement, so upon council's approval of the lease agreement, that will give me the authority to execute that lease, and we can invoice for payment.
And for the public, you might
And for the public,
a brief overview of
of
the
course.
leases.
So the lease is for the train lot, the lot that the train currently uses as a parking lot at the corner of College and Camino del Rio US 550. And the previous lease amount was for $35,000 a year. We have renegotiated that lease for $100,000 a year. This agreement will cover 1 year with an option for 2 additional years that council can extend the lease with an annual review of the lease. And it also goes back 1 year. So we hadn't received payment for the 2019 through 2020, so February to February lease. And so we will be receiving $100,000 for last year.
And Amber, I think it's important to point out that not only can the council review it, but it will review it on an annual basis.
The council will review the lease annually.
And to Ms. Dodson's presentation this evening, this money goes into the transportation fund. Services fund, and so that gives us more opportunity to expand our services and other things in the transportation realm, and I'm incredibly excited about that.
Yes.
Yes, we really.
That will be a future study session item.
Yep.
Did you need a motion?
I was just going to say.
We do need a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the new lease agreement with the Durango Silverton Narrow Gauge Railroad.
Second.
Any further discussion? Ms. Phillips, may we have a roll call, please?
Councilor Bricky?
Yes.
Councilor Baxter?
Yes.
Councilor Bettine?
Yes.
Councilor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Mayor Youssef?
Yes. Excellent, thank you. Amber Blake, we appreciate it. Moving on to item 13, I'm going to start with item 13.1, council reports and actions. Let's see. I apologize. I wanted to let everyone know, I just want to take the opportunity to finalize this. And I let the community know that we have met in executive session with as a council to discuss our evaluations of our 3 appointees, the interim city manager, the city attorney, and the municipal judge. And with this, we were piloting our new evaluation program process that we developed in 2019 as a council. We evaluated our employees based on the new criteria that we developed while establishing this new system. And then Mayor Pro Tem Dean Brookie and I met with each of the 3 appointees and we reviewed the evaluations, reviewed the scoring and the comments provided by council. We have received, and what?
And the public?
And the public. We had 2 pieces of feedback that we also shared with them. We have received signed evaluations back from our 3 appointees at this time, and we are receiving also feedback on the process from our appointees that we will further consider at a later date for continuous improvement to our program. I wanted to suggest that it's important to note that through this pilot process that as a council we determined for the community to know that all 3 of our appointees are meeting and or exceeding expectations, and I wanted to take the formal step with council of suggesting that our 3 appointees receive the same COLA increases that we approved through the 2020 budget process for our staff of 3%. And this would be retroactive January 1st, 2020. So I wanted to formalize that process and have it on the record, and looking for discussion and or motions from council.
So one of our previous conversations, it was brought up that possibly the contract for the interim city manager is not affected by COLA increases at this point in time. That amount is for the interim, the salary, because it was an increase at the time. Do you remember the conversation we had
I do not
last
recall
week?
that.
Yeah, I brought it up.
I do not recall I'm sorry, I was looking for your contract language, and that I guess that we might need a continuance on. I'm not sure that we want it. I'm not sure how to handle that, Dirk.
Well, I did check the contract language, and it was exactly the same as the prior language. I mean, you're not obligated to give anybody a raise, but it did contemplate that there would be a consideration of a raise after a review. So the language, it wasn't fixed without the possibility of a raise, I guess is the way
And I have a question.
Contingent on the duration of that interim contract, which could be indefinite, quite honestly.
Could be.
Or not. Hopefully not. But, I mean, there's no specific time frame, which could make it very awkward if there was no salary increase for that period.
My question.
So I'm concerned that normally this would be an annual raise, and this would make it a 3-month raise. So I'm a little concerned about that process.
And my concern is this was not agendaized. It's a new business topic,
Right.
so we can't make any decisions,
Right.
if I understand it correctly.
It's agendaized.
It's on the agenda, yeah.
Oh, it's under here.
13.
Oh, my apologies. I thought
Yeah,
you were bringing,
you know
I
what,
thought you
there's-
mentioned you were bringing it up under new business.
No, sorry,
Yeah,
there's an
that's-
we have
yeah.
old agendas, but it is on the agenda.
Okay, because I looked at it as new business.
Yeah, and we had brought it up, so I think we will need to resolve this.
I guess I would like to see, and I could possibly pull it up on my past documents, I'd like to see the contract, if I may, do you have it on the document?
I have a copy of it in my office. I could go get it, and if you want to move on to other business, and I could bring it back and make copies of that section.
Since there was a
When did this
question
get
about.
added, by the way? Was it Friday?
It was on.
Yeah.
You know, I don't know if we have to have this discussion right at this point in
Yeah.
time. Without further review of the contract, we might consider 2 out of 3 of our appointees and save
Continuance.
and
I just want clarity.
Huh?
If I could even find it, I would look it up.
I have it. I could entertain a motion for that, or we could move on to a different item and reconsider this later.
Okay. So we'll just,
Honestly, I was a little surprised to see it on the agenda as well, myself.
Yeah, I thought
But there was some confusion, I think, based on our last meeting.
Yes.
And so So I think that,
How about a continuance?
that's what I'm wondering.
How about, I could support a continuance. I think anything's going to be made retroactive. So we can have a review of the contract, we can look at it, we can see perhaps a written proposal of what is going forward. I think there was also going to be a comparison of what constituted COLA, whether that was, I'm looking to Amber because she mentioned it, whether that was cost of living or what other communities were doing. I remember that part of the discussion.
So the
as well.
3.1% is actually what Mountain States Employers Council has for the cost of living increase for Western Slope communities, and that's where we base the number off of for the employees.
Yeah.
The other items that if council is interested in using, we can have the consumer price index, we can have, but the cost of living for our region and municipalities on the Western Slope is 3.1%. We rounded it down to 3% with the budget conversations. And I can get additional information for you on that. It wasn't clear to me what.
May I suggest that because this does involve a discussion rather than just, and there might be items that should be put into the record in advance, that I would like to suggest we consider a continuance and have the documentation to go with it for the discussion, recognizing that anything would be retroactive.
Is that a motion?
I can make that motion, sure.
And I will forward you all my contract right
We're
now.
doing it for all three employees? Okay.
Just so we're clear on
So for city
how we're
attorney-
defining COLA. So I make that motion that we put this into a continuance and bring it up at the next city council meeting
Looking for a second.
with the documentation.
Second. Further discussion from council? Mrs. Phillips, may we have a roll call, please?
Counselor Baxter?
Yes.
Counselor Noseworthy?
Yes.
Counselor Patine?
Yes.
Counselor Brookie?
Yes.
Mayor Youssef?
Yes. Any other council reports and actions
I
today?
have one. I was at the chamber board meeting this morning, and we kind of did a recap of the Durango Rocks event. I don't know if any of you were able to attend that. I actually wasn't able to attend, but I just wanted to announce the winners of the event. It's kind of Durango's Oscars, and Ellen Roberts was the Citizen of the Year, and Business of the Year was Peak Food and Beverage. Small Business of the Year was Durango Harley Davidson. Nonprofit of the Year was Trails 2000. Ed Moreland Entrepreneur of the Year was Jeff and Jennifer Vierling. I hope I pronounced that
Yes.
correctly. Okay, good. Tailwind Nutrition, and Spirit of Durango was Durango Electrical Service. The Bill Mashaw Volunteer of the Year was Lisa Barrett. Citizen, oh, there it is again, Citizen of the Year, Ellen Robbins. Morley Ballantyne Award was Tiffany Parker. Leadership La Plata Barbara Conrad Award was Kelsey Ferrato. Young Professional of the Year was Luke Prince. Diplomat of the Year was Ben Freehoff. The Outstanding Contribution to the Community is in memory of Bliss Bruin. And the Ultimate Participation Award was Mike Smedley. I made it.
Had a drink of water.
Wow.
Very good.
Okay, yeah, so congrats to all the winners, and certainly well-deserved, and a great event. If you didn't get to go this year, it is a really fun and entertaining event that I've attended in the past, and I really recommend you get your tickets because they sell out.
Thank you very much.
I wanted to just share the notes I provided on our meeting with the Southern Ute Tribal Council that several of us were able to attend. We looked at, it was a really healthy, robust discussion around ways to strengthen our relationship with the Southern Ute Indian tribe. And we came up with, I think, 10 possibilities, which I'll just quickly share. Engage in real, meaningful partnership, which requires more regular communication rather than once a year. Ensure our community is welcoming to the Native American community. That was a bit of a discussion around the table, and I think we can look at that, and I also recognize that that's come up with the Community Relations Advisory Board as well. Recognize the Southern Utes' numerous contributions to Three Springs, the donation of land for Mercy, the VOA, or to the city, which was then given to the VOA, and the creation of Village One. And they talked about maybe using signs with some Ute words perhaps along the trails or near buildings to acknowledge that contribution, which I think is pretty appropriate. They asked that we demonstrate the value of Three Springs by funding a park, and that it does not have to be the original amount proposed several years ago. They asked that they consider, this is about with building, consider incentives that can help make building affordable or retaining housing pencil out, because it's a real risk to do this. To recognize our mutual concern for the environment, especially with regard to water and air, and this might be an area of collaboration, and they discuss concerns about use of Lake Nighthorse for recreational purposes. We looked at options to extend La Posta sewer study to include tribal lands, and we saw tonight that that's already a possibility. Explore ways of using each other's community opportunity zones for economic development. Look for ways to use the Southern Ute Indian Tribes Convention kind of similar to what the previous Director of Data, Frank Lockwood, had been doing. Some of his ideas of using the hotels in town and the convention center. And look at possibilities for partnerships with regard to water treatment capabilities. 2 upcoming cultural visits that we might want to consider would be the Bear Dance at the end of May and the Tribal Fair 100th anniversary, the 3rd week in September. And then the question that remains is, what do we do with this conversation? How do we actually turn it into a meaningful partnership? And I think that may warrant some discussion at a future time. And then the last thing I will add is that for the Alliance, Mike French has been named the Executive Director, and there will be a meet and greet on the 23rd from 4 to 6 p.m. at El Moro.
Thank you. Other reports?
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone who came to my office hours at Animas Chocolate. It was fabulous. I had 13 people attend, and we had robust discussion on numerous different topics, and it was very informative for me, and I also got to answer a lot of questions. So I'm really looking forward to my next office hours, which will be in February. I have not confirmed the time and date yet, but it'll be at Animas Chocolate, so I'll let everyone know. Great, thank you.
Dean?
Just want to follow up with a discussion on transit. Tomorrow I'll be up in Avon hosting the Colorado Association of Ski Town meeting for our winter meeting. The first panel discussion, which I'll facilitate as president of the organization, will be on electric vehicles. And we've got Chuck Rays, the senior associate with mobility and EV Grid for the Rocky Mountain Institute. He'll be talking about mobility transformation. Also, local governments and EV implementation person, Matt Fromer from the Southwest Energy Efficiency Program is a member of the panel, and electrical vehicle readiness plan is Eva Wilson from she's the mobility director for the town of Avon. So we'll have an open discussion amongst all our members, and it'll certainly be pertinent to what kinds of considerations we're having in Durango. That's for tomorrow, and then all day Thursday, we talk about a variety of topics: polystyrene bans, the Avon Urban Renewal District, which will be also totally pertinent to what we're doing here in Durango. And then a little recap of the heat recovery energy system from their wastewater treatment plant up in Avon. And each town that hosts this, each of our meetings gets to do a little dog and pony show about what they're doing new and different. And just interesting enough, they just finished their wastewater treatment facility as well. So it's a lot of pertinent things relative to what we're doing here in Durango.
Where is that taking place again?
This is in Avon, which is basically suburban Vail,
yes.
And the host to Beaver Creek Ski Area,
yes.
Which will be Friday's event. On my head.
Excellent.
Okay, moving on to future potential agenda items.
So following on with our evaluation conversation, we do need to set up a time to do an appointee goals and objectives conversation. I don't know how we want to handle that. Obviously, this is a new system that we're doing. So I don't know if that means that we need to do a special session or how we want to handle that. But I'm going to keep bringing it up until we figure out how we're going to do that. I think it's only fair to our appointees to get some goals and objectives out there so that next year's evaluations can be based upon us.
So there's a draft study session calendar that still needs to be further vetted, and then included, I believe, in a weekly status report, correct, Amber?
It will be sent out this week, and it's draft. It has a draft marked on it. That the draft study session calendar has been vetted with current projects that are ongoing to ensure that the information can be provided to you all in advance so that those meetings can be productive, as well as I've reached out to the community members for the presentations that either council has requested or they have requested through council. So I'm waiting on one more date back.
And that currently does not have this conversation on it, correct?
And that, well, it does, but it's not as soon as you would like to have it, nor as soon as I would like to have it.
Yeah, it is on there though. It's SMART goals, complete evaluations for appointees and generate SMART goal and objectives. Revisit for relevance and needed changes. Would love it if that would be tomorrow, but it's not. It's currently in March, so we'll see if that can get moved.
So one of the other things that I brought up fairly recently and that I think we need to have a discussion about is the transparency of the city council email address. So when someone goes on the website and wants to send an email to city council and they click on that and they send an email, it goes to the 5 of us, but it goes to an additional 3 people in the community, and that is not conveyed to the person who is sending that email. They do not know that it isn't going just to city council. And I think that in the interests of open and transparency, either it needs to just go to city council and city council forwards that on, or there needs to be a full disclosure so that it says, I don't know what it says on the email address, but city council and others, or whatever it is, but that they know that there are 3 other people and who they are that's receiving those emails. I think that that's really important to the community to know who they're sending emails to.
Historically, this has always been the case, and it's always been for purposes of action, you know, if there was so that staff could track that correspondence to us and act accordingly.
Sure, you can forward it.
And, you know, I might add, as, you know, I appreciate the comment, but, you know, as you've added to your email too, I mean, these are subject to any Cora request, and basically every email that's whether between us or from constituents to us or us to anybody is subject to full public review. So it doesn't, I mean, we could have 100 people on there and it's still, the public ought to know that it's going to be public.
And the public ought to know who
Not
they're
just-
sending it to. I'm not disagreeing with you that it's a public document, but I think it's only fair that if I'm sending an email to Kevin, I know it's going to Kevin. It's not going to Kevin and 5 other people. If I know it's going to Kevin and 5 other people, great. I know that. But the people who send us emails from our website do not know that. So I'm asking that they be informed.
Mm-hmm. Well, when I send an email to Senator Bennett, for example, I assume that there's somebody besides Senator Bennett that's also reading that email. As an elected official, that there's a number of people that are going to be.
I would make that assumption if I were writing to the city council. I would not assume that someone else was reading it. I would only assume that it was going to the whole city council. I think it's different when it's, you know, I wouldn't make that assumption.
Are you mostly concerned about the city website? If people are going there, or just in general changing it?
So I think that anyone who sends an email to an email list titled City Council should know who is receiving that email if it's more than just the City Council.
And who is it right now that receives it? Who else?
So it includes the administrative assistant for the interim city manager, it includes the interim city manager, and it includes the assistant city manager.
I would have never
So
assumed that.
it isn't just our appointee, it's also staff that receives it, so.
I have no problem with changing it but I also see why they've had it in the process in the past. I can see me taking the next step of forwarding most every email I get to make sure that staff gets it, because it's important that we're all receiving the same communication in most cases. Really, I think almost in any case that I can think of, with the exception, the only time that I'm doing it separately myself is if I'm doing something regarding evaluations. At the same time, I don't think it's honestly that big of a deal, because it's an easy forward by any city councilor who receives an item to staff. And maybe just as there is an easy city council at Durango Gov, it could just be, if we, instead of forwarding it to individual staff members, if there was a way to just forward it to one executive team, potentially.
You can send it to me and I'll forward it on. Fine.
Plus, you can also make your own email list that does that too. But I just think people should know, I think the public should know who they're sending an email to. And so I would like to suggest that somewhere along the line, we figure out how to make that, inform them.
We could put it as a subscript, as you have, just notifying them that it's subject to Cora requests, say this is also routed to staff.
So if you put it, it needs to be upfront, because they're not receiving an email from us. So when they get an email from us, it says the Cora information at the bottom, as you're suggesting. But when they're initiating an email, there is nothing that tells them, and this speaks to something Dirk and I have talked about also, there's nothing that tells them that their email to us is subject to a Cora request, but it also doesn't tell them who that email is actually going to.
I thought we had added something, and I haven't looked at the website, but I thought we had added something to the website that tells people that if you send emails, they're subject to Cora, but I haven't followed up on that.
So
I know we did talk about that.
So is that something that'll be rectified or discussed? What's the next action?
All I need is a direction, and then I can change either making the names appear on the list or removing staff and myself. Not, either way is perfectly fine.
My
Whatever,
preference is
however
that
council would like to do it.
My preference would be that we remove it, and then the appropriate, whether it's the mayor or the mayor pro tem, forwards it to the staff as appropriate.
I will only just make one thought just occurred to me, and I don't know if it matters to you all, but imagine that somebody thought of having it go to the city manager at least, because that person is a full-time employee and they're looking at their email and they're going to get it quickly. And whereas, I mean, you all may do this regularly too, but most city councilors, I think over time, it's much more intermittent. And so if a citizen sent something and they felt it was urgent, the first person to get it would be city manager, and most likely, and they could respond urgently. So I just thought of it as we're thinking. I don't mind your idea either. I think it's a good idea to disclose who it's going to, but I might suggest that maybe just have it on the website where it's listed, hey, this is actually getting copied in so that urgent messages are read more quickly or something like that.
Yeah, so
I think you're right about that.
Could I suggest that there might be times when you might want to make a statement about someone, and not that we want to hear that, but we've all received it, and that, I think there's...
We all have individual emails too.
So
Yeah,
are our individual emails also listed on the website where that city council email is?
They should be. I'll look that up right now.
So maybe that's one of the options, is that we have, you can send an email to city council, or you can send individual ones to city councilors, but it's in the same place. So that
And
they
it
don't
just
have to
says right
list it.
there
Yeah.
who that's going. I think it's good that it says who it goes to for sure. They should, they should know it so they can contextualize the message.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Every one of yours, so you have your name and a link, and then if they click the link to your email, it just goes to you.
And is that on the same area where the city council?
Yes, it's on the city council page, and you're each listed individually here.
So
So
that's the other option, it's just to.
members, and then I can go here,
Where's the city
and then there's
council
this
and
one, and it's back
interim
here.
city manager and.
So then that
If you have something that you don't want,
And then if you go back,
Yeah.
widely distributed, it
Absolutely
goes to...
fine to me too.
and so on this one, if you go here,
Wait, so.
it's right here.
Where? Yeah, but it's on a different page.
No, it's not, it's
Where
the
you-
same page.
Where you, I can't see where your cursor is, you're moving so fast.
Right
So
there.
slow down. Okay, so maybe that should,
And so on this, right underneath this,
should
it would say right underneath
received
there.
by-
Yeah,
Yeah.
so I can have the PIO team update this page.
Great.
With an asterisk that says this email will go to all 5 council members and the city manager.
Yes, that'd be great.
Okay.
That would be great.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, that's resolved.
And I'm glad you brought that up. And I just want to make sure, in full disclosure, when I took over this position, I did notify council.
You were the one that
I had
notified
it,
us.
yes. And so I wanted, well, it was prior to that I brought it up, prior to your question. So I just want to make sure that, in full disclosure, that was something that was brought up to make sure that council was all on the same page, and that I don't know what had been said previously, so I just wanted to make sure that the conversation was out there. We were all in agreement on how we were operating.
That sounds great. If we could update that website then. That would be helpful. Thank you. And Barbara?
I have two quick items, and one may either be for the interim city manager or Councilor Bettine. We talked back in 2019 as part of the budget process. I think it's $200,000 that's been allocated for Parks and Rec, but they have not, park upgrades. But I don't believe they've been identified, unless I missed it in minutes or something.
No, so I reached out to make sure that make sure the list was not available, because I had not seen the list either. And Parks and Recreation Advisory Board will be reviewing that at their next meeting. And the process that has been happening previously, that continues to happen until there's a policy change, is that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board at their meeting will make recommendations as to what those projects are for the year.
Specific parks.
Specific parks.
And when will we have that? Because I think it needs to be, is part of the budget review process. When do we anticipate? Because you mentioned that they're already talking about future projects, and I'd just like to get this one wrapped up, what we're going to spend the $200,000
For 2020?
Yes.
So as soon as that is completed, I don't know if they will decide on that in finality at the next meeting, or if it takes 2 months, but I'll follow up with Kathy. And then as soon as that list is finalized, then I'm happy to send it on to council.
Okay, I just think it's timely that we, that. And the other one is that at the Multimodal Advisory Board meeting last week, the plan had been to approve we had this discussion of the $1 million being used for multimodal, being used for the study on Camino del Rio, the study on 32nd Street going up to Holly of a traffic calming and other issues, a study of 15th, 14th, 15th, 14th, and up to 3rd.
The Spider intersection.
The Spider intersection, and then the remaining money for ADA. And as I understood that, we had a consensus around that, but the Multimodal Advisory Board wanted to review that. And I was just looking to see that that information was not forthcoming in January. And I know, Amber, you're going to be working on trying to get that very soon. Any indication of how long that might take?
So the board does feel very strongly that they would like to bring the conversation to Parks and Rec as well. So the next multimodal board meeting is the 3rd Wednesday in February, which would be the 19th. I had a discussion with, I think Mayor Youssef, I brought up the idea. So I'm meeting with staff next week to look at what is currently budgeted and then projected out for the next 5 years for those dedicated revenues for projects, to make sure that they're all balanced. That is in the budget, as we do the 5-year CIP. In looking at what projects could potentially be impacted, and that is the concern of the advisory board, is are there going to be future projects in general, not specific. So what exactly are you asking?
I just wonder, as we think about the budget process, again, trying to get some clarity around to some of the big ticket items that are not resolved.
Yeah, and my understanding was that in our budget conversation, because that money was coming from the College Avenue project.
And that's what's in the budget.
Yes.
And that's in the budget now, but one of the reasons why, at least why I said, okay, we can go forward with this, was because you brought up the concept of being able to switch that over. And I believe it was actually for the engineering of the results of the study for, and so I'm confused and a little concerned about why it's going back to Parks and Rec for a conversation when it was multimodal.
The multimodal board requested that. That's what the
That's
board.
why I'm asking,
I know.
Why would they request it?
I was in the Strategic Long-Term Finance Advisory Committee meeting, so I cannot tell you exactly why they requested that. I reached out And I'm hoping to meet with Spencer of that board to find out exactly what
took
place and where the thought process is.
Okay.
What I can say is that the Camino Crossing study is almost in draft. CDOT will be reviewing it. City staff will review it. The draft plan will go to the Multimodal Advisory Board. After it goes to the Multimodal Advisory Board, the Parks and Rec Board will be reviewing it as well because it provides connectivity to the trail system. And then we'll bring the draft plan to City Council. So at that point in time, we will know what options are recommended as feasible for crossings of Camino. That does not say that we can't appropriate, that council couldn't appropriate money for the design of a crossing of Camino del Rio. We just don't know what it is, what one rises to the top from this study. From previous conversations that I've had with the board, that was one of their concerns, wanting to see the results of the study, but that doesn't necessarily tie into the timing of taking it back to Parks and Rec. So I'm really not comfortable speaking for the board.
Yeah, and for me, it wasn't clear why this process. So I can say, yeah, as someone in the room, it wasn't clear. It was kind of determined. It wasn't clear.
Right.
So my main issue is that we get a timely resolution.
Right.
And that we recognize that there was consensus from the council on issues, but appreciate the involvement of the boards to get agreement and alignment.
And I can definitely say that the boards have worked very hard on a process between the three boards, the joint boards, so Multimodal, Parks and Recreation, and Natural Lands, for discussions and recommended projects for the two dedicated taxes. It's really Parks and Rec and Multimodal related to the 15, and then Parks and Rec and Natural Lands. There's no overlap between the Multimodal and Natural Lands on that process. And the last Parks and Rec Advisory Board meeting did have the kickoff of their conversation, starting that process that leads into the 5-year plan that shows up in the strategic plan from Parks and Recreation. That is the 5-year plan, that's the recommendation from those boards that comes to council. So
my only request is that we get
timely resolution.
Great. Thanks for following up on that. Any other by councilors? I have one. I attended the Strategy and Long-Term Finance Committee as the liaison, their first meeting last week, with Amber as the staff liaison. And we reviewed, we had introductions, we reviewed the resolutions, we looked at the meeting calendar, there was election of officers, and we discussed workflow. And that's why I'm bringing this up under future potential agenda items, is because since this was their very first meeting, and there had never been any, they had never had an agenda, this was the first discussion. They looked at the resolution and kind of the outline of what we had suggested as potential items, but they wanted me to come back to you, to council, to talk about, the first project that we want them to start working on, and the first maybe 2 projects that we want them to start really rolling up their sleeves and going to work. And with that specific information, they were not comfortable kind of picking a top 3 or anything like that. They really wanted to hear from us where we wanted them to go and where we wanted them to focus their attention for these first, I don't know, however many meetings, 6 meetings or so. And then once we determined what that item would be, we would have staff give them all of the background documentation so they could begin analyzing whatever it is we're asking them to begin to review and take a look at. So I had a conversation with staff and Councilor Brookie in our mayor meetings today, and we talked about potential items where they could dig down and where we could focus. And I will tell you where we ended up, that I will throw this out for council consideration. And it was a discussion around talking about the 2005 tax expiration, and when that goes away, how it will be absorbed. And if it were re-upped, where would it go? Understanding that a $0.25 goes to debt through 2025, but the other $0.25, what could it possibly go to? Potential police station, potential facilities, and this was brought up because it applies to all taxes, but of course the 2005 is most urgent. And this is kind of a high-level discussion for them to give them a purview of a whole lot of issues. It talks, they're looking at taxes, they're looking at funding, they're looking at allocations. They would, of course, look at the allocation between 2005 and 2015 and where it goes. If the 2005 goes away, how is that absorbed? So it was kind of discussed that that might be a good potential starting place. And I had brought up a few other ideas, but the issue around some of the ideas that I brought up is that we don't want them, this board the Strategy and Long-Term Finance Committee talking about items that other boards might need to work on. For example, allocation of dedicated tax dollars to maintenance versus capital. That borderlines on conversations with Parks and Rec, multimodal and other boards, so there was a feeling that that could overlap. So I just need to kind of be able to give them some direction. Our next meeting is February 10th, and we did talk about getting them documentation and information to start reviewing this by the end of January, so that it could
So
jump
when
into
we
their
did
meeting.
the resolution and also when we did the presentation to City Council and our approval of it, there were 3 main topics that were included in that as recommended and by consensus of council as things that would be considered. I don't have that in front of me right now.
I do. I'm happy to read it to you, because we did go over this. There was main topics, but there was a total of A through I, and it was reserve levels was one of the main ones with 3 underneath it. Benchmarking, how city compares to similar municipalities, and providing recommendations regarding the structure of funding for replacement maintenance of city assets, which I did bring up, and we had a long discussion around that. And
who's we?
At the Long-Term Finance Advisory Committee.
When I was there, I don't remember you going through all of those.
Well, we did. We brought up the asset management. You were talking a lot of it, quite honestly.
No, I wasn't. I was sitting.
Well, Amber did bring it up, and so we did talk about that, because I had talked about having also, part of the discussion was where we went during our priorities work session and what issues we are focusing on as a council that they might be able to piggyback on. So I was talking about the budgeting process and policies around the budgeting process and CIP, and then Amber brought up asset management ideas. But what I am communicating to you is since then, we're trying to figure out, this also, what we adopted as a council also talks about allocation of scarce resources, review the fiscal health of the city of Durango, review fiscal policies, review and discuss decision support tools, advice on long-term debt and projects, and other duties as assigned by city council. And I think their preference was that we assign them something, and so that's what I'm coming back on.
Could I suggest that the 2005, though urgent to start thinking about, maybe too narrow, and what my own hope and the concern I have is that we have some huge infrastructure needs coming up, and from what I can tell, no clear plan for how to finance them. And we have some huge, in my mind, potential future maintenance issues. So I would like to suggest that they consider the big items that are most consequence to this city, which for me is the infrastructure needs, which includes the stormwater management, the water treatment capabilities, a police station. I'm sure I'm missing things, as well as how do we prepare to cover all of the future maintenance of the whole of the city's assets.
And I think, Melissa, your suggestion about the 2005 dovetails with what Barbara suggested. Because it is one of the possible vehicles for funding some of those needed situations. But I think that maybe if you take it up even a higher level from the 2005 discussion, so that they're aware of all our forthcoming challenges, and then have the 2005 discussion in the context of all the challenges. I think that would probably be a really good idea.
So looking at all the infrastructure needs and with the goal of helping us figure out how to fund it.
Some funding vehicles, which could include the 2005, it could include debt, it could include
All sorts
all
of
options.
Right, but that would be one of their mechanisms. So I think you're on the right track with that.
But a larger, I would prefer a big picture.
That's a large, so they're going to take a 10-year plan. They're going
Yeah.
10 years.
Yeah.
Which
And
means,
then-
of
and you
course, the
guys want-
facilities plan, which they did ask for also, I
They-
think.
yeah.
Yeah, so.
You
I
guys
think
good
that's
with that?
good. Yeah, I think the thought of looking at the 2005 and then expanding that into all the things it could be used for is, yeah, maybe we look at it from the top down as opposed to one single source and
I mean, for me-
metastasize that, yeah.
For me, the biggest thing, and it relates to everything you guys are saying, is really the structural imbalance. I mean, just the idea that you've got 2005 is going away. Where does that go? That's part of it. And you've got to pay for infrastructure needs. That's certainly part of it. But it's really the flat revenue aspect of what do you do? Does the Wayfair decision have, do you have predictions about how that comes out? Can you model how the revenues might change if Colorado can get their act together relevant to that? So I think that really, it's definitely bigger. It's a big thing, but it's the thing that this council and the next one is really going to have to start working on.
And I think you're right. I think that's a funding mechanism of all the aspects of the things that we need, right? So the funding mechanism is let's get more aggressive with that revenue
Right, what is it?
production. How else can we do it?
Yeah.
Right?
Are there other ways to?
There are, yeah,
to
absolutely.
sort of look at resolving that. You know, that's what the county just kind of went through. And they ended up coming back with their recommendations. I think that's the big piece. And it does deal with all of those other things.
Okay.
And to your point, Mayor, I would comment that through the process that we'll be bringing back the draft document on this advisory board, we heard from several advisory boards, probably most, that they're looking to us for what are the 3 big things they want us.
They're looking for us, yeah.
They were looking for us to focus on, and they can also come back with what their interests are. And that was a discussion last week at the Multimodal Advisory Board, what they thought was important, but they wanted to hear from us what we wanted them to be focusing on. So I think the discussion is not isolated just to the Strategic and Long-Term Finance Committee.
They're all wanting that direction.
Yes.
So much for starting them out with an easy one. Yeah.
Right.
Not that that was an easy one.
Fix this one.
That's a big one. And so
They're smart.
I'll talk us
They're all
about what
smart.
information we want to get to
They're
them
smart folks.
Unfunded,
for that.
unfunded
Yeah.
issues.
I'm trying to figure out what we would put in that packet.
So you're talking like plans, like the
Right, so I
stormwater
do, right,
master
I would
plan,
do
you're talking
stormwater master
facilities
plan
needs.
phase 1, facilities master plan,
Needs,
housing plan. I mean, I can give them all the
Water
master
treatment
plans that we have,
That's
plans
really-
that we have. And then we can move forward from there. I can give them the presentations we have on this, the infrastructure needs that we've put together. We can give them a asset.
I don't want to overwhelm.
You can give them some estimations of, you already have
Right.
estimations of what the infrastructure needs are in terms of
Yeah.
gross, right? And then talk about just the bigger picture structural imbalance and let them work on the big
they're going to
map.
have some homework to do, aren't they?
They are. I think some of the information that might actually be really helpful is you captured it when you did the engagement for
That's what I was
the,
thinking.
to be the tax that failed.
Yeah, that's a really
That's
good point.
what I was
Yep.
thinking.
Because that had a lot of
The
information on
baseline.
facilities, police station.
Yep.
And then they'll come back with more questions and more, yeah.
Yeah, I think we had a list of available documents as opposed to making.
We have them all on the website.
And we've got that, so, you know, I don't think you need to give them a stack, right, the first meeting.
Might overwhelm them.
Yeah, they'll leave.
They'll start with, yeah.
2 hours a month.
And our interim finance director, Mansfield, would help us, but I don't have the documents here, but there is a whole asset management, like, organization that has the template for what we might be considering. So I think something to that effect of how big a city's asset management plan might look like.
And I can pull together, we have an asset
Yeah.
management plan for transit. We have dispersed asset management plans. We don't have the holistic.
But I saw this one going on one of the websites. It's a comprehensive.
Great.
Great.
And I can pull it up from my files.
Excellent, thank you guys. Anything else? Okay, with that, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want, our next regular city council meeting is February 4th at 6:30 p.m. I want to thank our PIO professionals in the back office, Victor Locke and Mitchell Carter. Thank you for bringing this live on DGov. And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
We have a study session at the end of the month.